A former school teacher turned rocker was killing time strolling through the seediest part of Paris, France. He was wondering what it would be like to fall in love with one of the many prostitutes on the streets. Well, he wrote a song about it, and the story of that song that rescued a Hall of Fame power trio from destitution and put them on a course for worldwide supremacy is next on Professor of Rock. It's very cool. You're going to want to see it. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you are more partial to spinning the black circle than listening to music from a cloud, you are going to love this channel. Make sure to subscribe right now. Do that below. Click the bell so that you always get our daily features, the stories of the great rock and roll songs and albums from the legends. Also, check out more content at our page on Patreon to become an insider to help us curate this history. You know, if there's one thing that I've learned from all of the artist interviews, the research, the books that I've read about music, making it in the music business is brutally difficult. As Bon Scott succinctly put it, it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And for the Police, the vaunted power trio of Stuart Copeland, Andy Summers, and Sting, the climb to the pinnacle of rock and roll began at the very bottom. When the Police began playing live concerts in 1977, they were paid next to nothing for their performances at whatever nightclub that they could get a booking. They had to bootstrap it on the road in order to have enough cash to eat, to pay for petrol, to get from gig to gig. The band's tour bus at that time was actually not a bus at all. It was Andy Summers' compact Citroen Diane automobile. Not only did they use Summers' car to take them to each gig with all their gear piled in it, they also used to sleep in it. In October 1977, the threesome were driving from Amsterdam to Paris to play a show at the Nashville Club in Paris, in the middle of the seediest part of the City of Light. Summers' car broke down, and the trio had to find a place to sleep and store their gear. The car was beyond repair, and it had to be towed back to London. The band was basically broke, so the only place that they could afford was a drab flea-bag hotel behind Gare Saint-Lazare in northern Paris. Matters got worse when the group was told by the manager of the Nashville Club that they were canceling their show because the Damned, who were headlining that night, they had left town and went back to England. The journey from Amsterdam to Paris had become a nightmare for the down vagabonds, but it wasn't a total loss. Amidst the double whammy setback, something fortuitous was going to happen for the Police in Paris. Just after the band got the bad news about the canceled gig, the three guys went their separate ways to knock about town. Sting elected to wander around the streets of Paris, including an aimless stroll through an area called Montmartre, and experienced the famous red light district. The streets in the red light district, of course, full of sex shops and prostitutes. Sting was out of his element. He had never encountered a so-called lady of the night, lady of the evening. It was, needless to say, an eye-opening scene for the former English teacher. Taking in the spectacle, he wondered what it would be like to fall in love with a prostitute and try to rescue her from selling her body to the night. After all, he thought, some of these women must actually have boyfriends or even husbands. When Sting returned to the hotel, I guess he saw a fading poster hanging on the wall of the hotel foyer. It was advertising a theatrical production of Cyrano de Bergerac. He began to focus on the lead character of the Cyrano story, whose name was Roxanne. Sting also loved the romantic history of the name Roxanne. In addition to being the name of the heroine in Cyrano de Bergerac, Roxanne was also the name of the wife of Alexander the Great. Cyrano de Bergerac is, of course, a celebrated play. It's been translated many times since it was originally written by French poet and dramatist Edmond Rostand in 1897. There was a real Cyrano that Rostand fashioned his play after, who was a strong-willed man, a renowned marksman, and a gifted poet and musician. He was a heartwarming personality that also had a huge nose and was regarded as being unattractive to women. Cyrano believed that his physical abnormality would prevent him from ever landing the love of the girl that he really cared about.
You shall tell me the whole story someday when we have time.
Roxanne's Cyrano de Bergerac is a captivating story of tortured love that ends with Roxanne falling for Cyrano. But spoiler alert, if you don't want to see this, fast forward through this part, our hero Cyrano actually dies in the end of the original production.
White plume.
Roxanne.
Sting began writing Roxanne with the pleading lyric, "Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light."
You don't have to put on the red light.
The line directly referenced his jaunt through the red light district where brothel managers replaced the common white or yellow light bulbs with the red lights. Of course, if the red light outside of the brothel or building is turned on, as a signal to potential clients that the dwelling was a house of ill repute and there was a prostitute available for hire. In Sting's tale, the narrator is pledging his love for Roxanne and that he would treat her the way that she deserves to be treated. You know, the lyrics, Roxanne, you don't have to wear that dress tonight. You don't care if it's wrong or if it's right.
It's for money. You don't care if it's wrong or if it's right.
He also says, I wouldn't talk down to you. I have to tell you just how I feel. I won't share you with another boy.
How I feel. I will share you with another boy.
When Sting had finished the lyrics for Roxanne, he didn't show it to Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland with a great deal of confidence, I guess. Summers recalled that Sting was very shy about presenting his songs for consideration in the early days of the band. The first time that Andy Summers heard Roxanne was when Sting played it for him. He was in Andy's living room. And Summers thought that the rough draft that Sting played for him was brilliant.
You don't have to sell your body to the night.
The trio then began working out the music for Roxanne in a damp basement in North London, I believe. Sting conceived Roxanne with a bit of a bossa nova feel.
Lovely, the girl from Ipanema goes walking in.
But it was Stuart Copeland who suggested that the song be arranged with a tango rhythm. Summers remembers Copeland telling Sting specifically where to place the bass notes. He said it was a bit tricky. Now, in an interview with the magazine The Independent, Sting walked us through the evolution of Roxanne's structure. Very interesting. He was playing a very sparse bass line, just 2 notes per bar, when Copeland encouraged Sting to come in on the offbeat, which turned that song into a tango.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red.
The band was grooving to Bob Marley at that time, and Sting loved to fashion his vocals after the reggae master.
Stand up for your right.
Now, to fatten up the melody, the Police peppered the track with frequent whoops and swoops, and then created that big rock and roll chorus.
Roxanne, Roxanne.
It was an unconventional reggae meets mambo hybrid. It really gave Roxanne a unique arrangement that instantly intrigued and challenged the senses. Another significant component of Roxanne's unorthodox arrangement was the unusual drum pattern by the incomparable Stuart Copeland.
You don't have to put on the red light.
One of my favorite drummers ever. On Roxanne, Copeland plays on his double bass drums under a rock hi-hat pattern that really thumps the quarter notes. Really don't like calling Stuart Copeland simply a drummer. I mean, the breadth, the depth of his artistry, it went far beyond a beat track. His approach to creating rhythm and percussion was always just so fresh and unpredictable. Stuart was really big on crafting a new sound on virtually every song that he performed on. The Copeland innovation was a big part, huge part of what gave the Police such a cool, unparalleled dynamic. As we go into the song breakdown, I want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, glasses I always wear. Speaking of style, Zenni is amazing. You go to Zenni.com, you can pick from So many different variety of colors and shapes and sizes. Whatever your mood, whatever your style, whatever you're going for, Zenni's got it. Go to Zenni.com, put in your prescription. Less than a double LP set, you're going to have a new pair of glasses, and you're never going to go back. Go to Zenni.com and check it out today. Okay, back to the song. And Andy Summers, the underrated, underappreciated Andy Summers, also an invaluable part of the Police aesthetic. His instantly recognizable guitar riff on Roxanne, it's a prime example of what he brought to this Hall of Fame trio. He too invented a musical element that made that hybrid arrangement work so well. Summers' riff provided the sizzle that gave Roxanne another dimension to an already complicated structure.
You don't have to wear that dress tonight.
Summers' guitar line gave the song a stabbing punk intensity that I think the track really needed to give it a street edginess. Subject matter, Sting's Roxanne, was inherently risque. The music had to have a provocative movement, of course, and Andy Summers' guitar provoked a dark fascination that carried the tune. When the Police went to the Surrey Sound Studios in Leatherhead, Surrey, to record their first LP, Outlandos D Amour, they had a very small recording budget, with no manager or a record contract at that time. The studio that they worked in was a converted facility located above a dairy that was operated by brothers Nigel and Chris Gray. The band laid down a few tracks, including Roxanne. The session for Roxanne began with a mishap that ended up being one of those great happy accidents in rock and roll. Sting was just about to sing the first line of Roxanne when he noticed that there was an upright piano next to his live microphone. He was feeling kind of tired, from being up late the night before, so he sat down on what he thought was a closed lid on the nearby piano, but the lid was actually open. And Sting sat right down on the keyboard, and as soon as Sting's buttocks hit the keyboard, out came the tonal piano chord, followed by Sting's embarrassed chuckle, and that's on the recording. The band thought the whole thing was hilarious, so they, of course, left it in the recording. I'm sure the fact that they had very little money contributed to their decision not to do another take. Studio time is not cheap, even in a studio that is situated above a dairy. The band pointed further attention to the incident in the liner notes for Outlandos D Amour, creating Sting as playing the butt piano. You can check that out in the liner. Roxanne was one of the first few tracks that the band recorded at Surrey. Now, Sting was very honest when he admitted that he regarded Roxanne as more or less a throwaway. Sting felt that the song was what he termed an anachronism because, the song didn't stack up well with their usual material. It's just the way it is sometimes with songs. They think it's a throwaway and it's a hit. Enter Stuart Copeland's brother, Miles Copeland. Now, Miles was an entrepreneur. Although he cared about his brother Stuart up to the point of the band's recording session for the debut album, he hadn't been particularly interested in the Police. Miles would visit the studio during the recording sessions, to offer some brotherly advice to Stuart. That was about it at that time. Now, when the band played some finished tracks that they had recorded, Miles was politely diplomatic. Now, when they played Roxanne, though, Miles freaked out. He told the band that he thought the song was, quote, amazing. In fact, Miles was more impressed with Roxanne than any other track that the band had ever played for him. Of course, the guys were elated about Miles' enthusiasm for Roxanne, especially Sting, who had truly dismissed Roxanne's potential before that. Following his passion for Roxanne, Miles Copeland agreed to manage the band. That's what it did. That song was a game changer for him with him. He brought the music to A&M Records, and he scored a distribution deal for the Police. Now, the deal was not a typical one in that they didn't receive any advance of any kind, but they would actually be paid royalties from record sales. Now, it wasn't an ideal business arrangement because the band needed money, but it was a start. A&M released Roxanne as the lead single from Outlandos D Amour in 1978, but the single was a stifferoo. It didn't chart anywhere. One of the biggest reasons that Roxanne failed to generate traction is because BBC Radio just refused to play it flat out. Not surprisingly, the BBC had an issue with the song's distasteful subject matter, but they didn't issue a ban on the song, they just elected not to play it. Now, the police shrewdly started a rumor that Roxanne was banned by the BBC, because everybody loves controversy, and that stirred up underground interest in the song, especially with the popular offshore pirate radio station, Radio Caroline. After the disappointing run of Roxanne, A&M released a second single, Can't Stand Losing You.
I can't stand losing you.
This was actually banned by the BBC, primarily due to the single's controversial cover that portrayed Stuart Copeland hanging himself over an ice block being melted by a portable radiator. Can't Stand Losing You also included the line, I guess you'd call it suicide, but I'm too full to swallow my pride.
Guess you'd call it suicide, but I'm too full.
Many conservative critics deemed the lyric callous and irresponsible. Now, despite the controversy surrounding the second single, Can't Stand Losing You clawed to number 42 in the UK, but the third single from the debut album by The Police, So Lonely, great song, that failed to chart at all. In 1979, the U.S. division of A&M Records decided to make Roxanne the first single released by The Police in North America. The reissued single was off to another slow start until a DJ in Austin, Texas began playing it, and the station was just flooded with requests for the track. Roxanne elicited similar success in Boston when legendary programmer Oedipus began playing the song on WBCN to great listener response. The smoke on American airwaves ignited the fire for Roxanne around the world for the reissue campaign. Roxanne broke the Billboard Hot 100. It peaked at number 32, went all the way to number 8 in New Zealand, and the Police finally had a hit in England, with the second run of the single rising to number 12 on the UK singles chart. Funny how that works. Now, although Roxanne was technically a mid-charter in America, it's of course become a rock standard, classic rock standard, signature song for the legacy of the Police. For many, Roxanne was their orientation to his gifted scooping singing style with Sting, where he mixes the tones between his natural voice and his falsetto. The vocal performance of Roxanne, of course, classic Sting, he has a unique ability to just throttle down his voice so that his vocal cuts through with power without straining his vocal cords. I've always admired that about Sting, very distinct. Sting hits a crazy high D note in Roxanne and then punctuates the tormented anguish of the track's plotline by effortlessly raising his voice to a higher octave with a beseeching falsetto. Miles Copeland's gut instinct about Roxanne was ultimately validated by the song's historic airplay on classic rock radio and its infinite prominence in pop culture. Miles was also spot on with his early prediction that Roxanne was going to break the Police wide open. The success of the re-release of Roxanne was followed by the international smash Message in a Bottle. That landed at number 1 in the UK and in Ireland and Spain. It was a top 5 in many other countries. Strangely, Message in a Bottle stalled at number 78 on the Billboard Hot 100 here. It wasn't until the Police released their third studio album, Zenyatta Mandata, that was in 1980, that they really hit it in the USA, and they scored their first top 10 hit with Don't Stand So Close to Me. Another story for another day. After that, only the 3 members of the Police could stop the band from achieving monumental success. When the Police broke up in '83, after the release of Synchronicity, they were arguably the biggest band in the world. In my opinion, they were the biggest band, for sure. They had gone from not having a pot to piss in to the apex of rock and roll. But when they reached the top, they'd already disbanded. That was very confusing. And as they had on that fateful autumn night in Paris back in 1977, the 3 virtuosos went their separate ways. Of course, Sting has had incredible success as a solo artist since the breakup of the Police. Stuart Copeland's genius has made him one of the most coveted score composers and collaborators in the business. Andy Summers has also done very well composing music for films and other projects during his post-Police career. To me, Roxanne is that early track that just defines the Police sound, that wonderful mix of punk, pop, new wave, and rock. Truth is, the Police are very sophisticated punk rock, while straddling those catchy pop hooks. As a band, they experimented with a lot of different sounds throughout their output, but they always had those magnetic melodies that attracted mass appeal. I've always wondered, fantasized, as I'm sure you have, what would it have been like if the Police would have remained as a unit and continued to make magic together? What would the next 3 or 4 albums have sounded like? Sting, Summers, and Copeland certainly left us with a trove of epic music to treasure. It all started with the offbeat romantic breakthrough about a man falling in love with a courtesan named Roxanne. Make sure to leave us a comment about the Police and this epic classic rock. What are your memories of it? What other Police songs should we put under the microscope here? What would the Police been like? What would their next few albums been like? Tell us in the comments. I'd love to hear that. If you like this channel, make sure to subscribe below. We do this content every single day, and make sure to look us up on Patreon. That helps us keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. We'll see you soon.